I had exactly $487,200 in the escrow account the morning my surgeon told me not to lift a coffee mug with my right hand. My shoulder was wrapped like a cast, my pain meds made time feel soft around the edges, and the nurse had just walked out when a FedEx envelope slid under my apartment door. Inside was a small black USB token, a single printed email, and a sticky note that said, "Check the metadata, then call Hannah. If you miss this, you lose everything." I stared at the number on my banking app, watched it refresh, and felt my stomach go cold as the balance dropped to 0.00. Someone had sent wire instructions from my company email, and the bank had treated it like gospel. I put the phone face down. Then I waited. Let me take you back. 4 weeks earlier, Chicago was in that early spring mood where the wind still thinks it owns you, but the sun starts pretending it's kind. I'd built my company, Latticebridge, in a glass-walled co-working space off Fulton Market, the kind with free cold brew and founders who never blink when they say burn rate. Latticebridge wasn't flashy AI, it was compliance software for companies that get sued if they mess up. We helped hospitals, insurers, and payroll firms keep their data clean, their audit logs intact, and their paperwork defensible. The work was quiet. The money wasn't. I'd started it with Grant Voss. Grant was the kind of man who could sell calm. He spoke like every sentence came pre-approved by a board of directors. At 25, that charm felt like leadership. At 38, I'd learned it was often just practice. We'd been engaged once. We'd never married. We did what ambitious people do when the relationship cracks, but the business still pays. We rebranded the breakup as a mature transition. He kept the title of COO, I kept CEO. And we told investors we were aligned. We were not aligned. The money in that escrow account, the $487,200, wasn't my paycheck or a rainy day fund. It was an escrow dispute resolution reserve, the kind you set aside when a new enterprise customer insists on safeguards. The hospital chain we were onboarding had a clause. If we missed certain implementation deadlines, the funds would return to them automatically. If we hit the milestones, the funds released to us as a bonus. Grant had pushed hard for those terms because he wanted the logo. I'd agreed because I wanted the future. The public event that kicked everything off wasn't a reunion or a wedding. It was a gala at the Field Museum, a civic innovation night full of donors, council members, foundation executives, and tech founders pretending they didn't care who was watching. Grant loved galas. He loved anything with name tags and overhead lighting that made people look more important than they were. I hated them. I went anyway. My shoulder wasn't injured yet. I could still move like my body belonged to me. That night, I wore a simple black dress and a blazer I'd owned for years. Nothing screamed money. Nothing begged for attention. We walked in under a banner that said, "Chicago builds the future," and Grant immediately found his audience. He shook hands like he was collecting them. "Councilman Reddick," he said, voice warm. "We've been meaning to connect." Councilman Reddick was a sleek man with a too-perfect smile and the kind of posture that says he's always standing near cameras. He laughed like everything was already funny. "And you must be Maren," he said, looking at me like I was a supporting character. "The one who actually builds the thing." "I build the thing," I agreed. His eyes flicked to my name tag. "Military background, right?" "Air Force," I said. Grant's hand landed lightly on my back, like a claim. "She ran logistics," he told them. "She's basically a machine." It sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. We spent the first hour doing polite loops. Donors asked what Latticebridge did. I explained calmly, in human language. "We keep the paper trail honest," I said. "Audit logs, consent records, access histories. If someone touches data they shouldn't, we can show it." A foundation director nodded. "So you're like, cybersecurity?" "Closer to evidence," I said. "We're the receipts." Grant smiled every time I said it, like he'd invented the line. Then the night shifted, quietly, the way it always does when someone decides you're useful. A woman with a silver bob and a badge that said Field Museum Board approached us. Her name was Sloan Mercer. I recognized it from a donor list Grant had obsessed over for weeks. Grant went bright. "Ms. Mercer, I'm Grant Voss." Sloane's attention stayed on me. "Maren Caldwell," she said, reading my tag. I've heard your name from an attorney friend. Said you're one of the only CEOs she trusts to tell her the truth. I felt Grant stiffen next to me. That's generous, I said. Sloane smiled. It's rare. We need rare. Are you taking new board advisory roles? Before I could answer, Grant slid in. We're always open to strategic partnerships. Sloane didn't look at him. I didn't ask you. Grant's smile stayed in place, but it thinned. I should have enjoyed that moment more. Instead, I noticed something else. Councilman Reddick talking to Grant near the bar, heads close, private laughter. I didn't like it, not because of jealousy, because of pattern. Grant had a tell when he was building something behind my back. He became friendly in a way that felt practiced. He started using my name in conversations I wasn't in, like a prop. 2 days after that gala, the hospital chain's legal team sent over the final contract packet. It was thick, full of terms that mattered. My attorney, Hannah Lee, flagged one clause in particular and highlighted it in yellow. It's a canary clause, she told me over the phone. A what? It's a clause that triggers a consequence if anything shady happens, even if you can't prove intent yet. Like a canary in a coal mine. In this case, if there's an unauthorized change to wire instructions, payment routing, or signature authority, the hospital can freeze the escrow and demand a forensic audit before releasing funds. That sounded protective. It sounded safe. I signed. Grant complained. They don't trust us. They don't trust anyone, I said. That's why they're still in business. My flaw, the one I've carried like a quiet bruise my whole adult life, is that I avoid confrontation until the evidence is undeniable. It comes from the military. You don't panic on suspicion. You verify. You document. You move with certainty. That discipline built my company. That discipline also gave Grant room. The accident happened the following week on a Tuesday that started normal. I was driving back from a customer meeting, thinking about onboarding timelines, when a delivery van clipped my rear panel trying to beat a yellow light. My car spun. My shoulder took the hit. The airbag slapped me like a door. At the ER, a nurse said, "You're lucky." I'd learned that lucky in medical settings usually means not dead. My surgeon scheduled the repair quickly. It was not optional if I wanted full function back. A few days later, I woke up in my apartment with my arm immobilized, a stack of discharge papers on my table, and Grant texting like a concerned partner. "Don't worry about anything. I've got the meetings. Focus on healing." It sounded kind. It was a takeover. That's when the clock trigger started. Hannah called me the next morning. Her voice was sharp enough to cut through the fog of medication. "Maren, listen carefully," she said. "If you miss this, you lose everything." I sat up too fast and regretted it immediately. What did I miss? "The hospital's counsel just emailed," she said. "They received updated wire instructions from your account. They're invoking the canary clause. They froze escrow release and they're demanding a forensic audit." My mouth went dry. "I didn't send anything." "I know," Hannah said. "But it came from your email address. They attached the message." She forwarded it. I opened it with shaking fingers. The email was short, polite, and devastating. "Per our updated internal finance routing, please wire escrow funds to the following account effective immediately." The signature block had my name, my title, my phone number. But the language wasn't mine. It was too smooth, too generic. I scrolled down and saw the bank details. The receiving entity was an LLC I'd never heard of. Northgate Strategic Holdings, LLC. My assistant, Priya, called right after. "Maren," she whispered, like we were in a church. "Grant told me not to bother you, but something is off. He changed the admin settings on your Google Workspace. I lost access to your sent folder." That was the first folder. The second folder arrived as a FedEx envelope the next day. The USB token. The printed email. The sticky note. Check the metadata. Then call Hannah. I didn't know who sent it. There was no return address, just a prepaid label. I plugged the token into my laptop with my left hand and opened the file inside. It wasn't a video. It wasn't a manifesto. It was a system export, an email header report, the kind most people never see. If you've never looked at email metadata, it's the unglamorous truth behind the message. It shows the route the email took, the servers it passed through, the IP address it originated from, the authentication checks it passed or failed. I called Priya. Can you pull the raw headers from the email the hospital received? I can't from my account, she said, but I can from the ticketing system. The hospital attached it. Do it, I said. Send it to Hannah and me. 5 minutes later, the headers landed. Hannah called. Okay, she said. We have something. What? The email passed SPF but failed DKIM. I blinked. Explain it like I'm in pain, because I'm in pain. She made a small sound that almost counted as a laugh. SPF is like a guest list. It says what servers are allowed to send mail for your domain. DKIM is like a signature stamp. It proves the message wasn't altered and that it came from an authorized system. So, it failed the signature stamp. Yes, she said, which suggests it wasn't sent the way your real emails are sent. It was injected. Injected by who? We're about to find out, Hannah said, because the metadata includes the originating IP. It's not your office. It's not your home. It's a mobile hotspot registered to a device that belongs to... She paused. I could hear her clicking. Grant. My throat tightened in a way that wasn't about injury. I wanted to call him immediately. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did what I always do when the world tries to turn emotional. I went quiet. Okay, I said. What's the move? Hannah's voice dropped. This isn't revenge. This is justice. We moved in layers, not theatrics. First, we locked down my accounts. Priya coordinated with IT, and I insisted on speaking directly to our security vendor, not Grant. Grant texted me within an hour. Why are you changing passwords? IT says you requested it. You okay? I didn't respond. Second, Hannah filed for an emergency injunction. In plain terms, that's a court order that stops someone from moving money or destroying records while you investigate. She also drafted an affidavit for me. An affidavit is a sworn statement. You don't just say, I didn't do it. You state facts under penalty of perjury. I signed it with my left hand, my signature ugly, but real. Third, we hired a forensic auditor, not a dramatic hacker. A boring, brilliant specialist named Malcolm Reyes, who spoke like a spreadsheet but saw patterns like a detective. He asked me one question that made my skin prickle. Who has access to your notary? He said. My notary? The hospital contract packet, he explained. Signature authority changes require a notarized form. The bank doesn't move escrow funds on a random email alone. Someone also filed the signature authority change. My heart sank. Grant said he handled the banking paperwork while I was under. Malcolm nodded once like he'd expected it. Then the notary is your mystery object. We need to see it. Priya found it in our internal drive. Grant had saved it under a folder titled Admin Cleanup. The PDF looked normal at first glance. My name, my title. A new authorized signer listed, Grant Voss, a stamp from a mobile notary service. A digital signature. Malcolm zoomed in. This is a notarized signature, he said, but the timestamp is the day of your surgery. I was unconscious. Exactly, he said. The notarized signature is either forged or someone used your identity. Hannah leaned forward. Can we prove it? Malcolm pointed to the PDF properties. Metadata. There it was again. The quiet killer. PDF metadata shows who created the file, what software, what device. Creator, G, Voss iPad editing software, PDF expert location services, enabled. Can we use that? I asked. Hannah didn't answer immediately. She was thinking like a lawyer, which means she was thinking about what survives sunlight. We can subpoena, she said finally, but first we need leverage. That's when the ally identity twist landed in my life like a door opening. The sticky note had said, call Hannah. But it also implied someone else. Whoever mailed the token knew what to look for. I asked Priya to check our visitor logs from the week of my surgery. Our building kept digital records. Priya came back with one name. Hannah Lee wasn't the only Hannah in my life. There was also Hannah Caldwell, my older sister. We share a last name, but we don't share a childhood. She was the golden child. I was the scapegoat. She was straight A perfect debate team, law school. I was the quiet one, the one who joined the Air Force at 18 because it was the first place that felt like rules could protect you. We hadn't spoken in months. She called me that night anyway. Maren, she said. Before you ask, yes, I sent the envelope. I held the phone with my left hand and stared at my ceiling. Why? Because I'm not supposed to, and because you're about to get eaten, she said. What do you mean, not supposed to? She took a breath. I'm a forensic investigator for the U.S. Attorney's Office, Financial Crimes Unit. The room felt suddenly smaller. You're... what? I can't tell you details, she said quickly. But Grant's name popped up in an unrelated case last month. Shell LLC's, Fast Wires, a pattern. When I saw his connection to you, I ran a lawful open-source check. Then I saw the hospital email and realized he'd escalated. My voice came out calm, even though my pulse wasn't. You're telling me the federal government already knows he's dirty. I'm telling you he's on the radar, she corrected. But that doesn't automatically protect you. You still have to protect yourself. I swallowed. So you mailed me evidence? I mailed you a way to see the truth, she said. The metadata doesn't lie, Maren. People do. I hated that she was right. I hated that she knew me well enough to know I'd hesitate without proof. Why help me now? I asked. Silence on the line for a beat. Because I didn't help you then, she said, quieter. And because I'm tired of watching you carry consequences that don't belong to you. History scars don't look like bruises. They look like patterns you repeat. When we were kids, our mother used to say, Hannah will be somebody. Maren will figure it out. When I won an award in basic training, my mother asked Hannah to proofread the letter I wrote home because Hannah's the smart one. When I launched Lattice Bridge, my mother told people Hannah helped with the legal stuff, even though she hadn't. Dehumanization is often polite. Grant learned how to use that. In our early company days, when investors asked questions, Grant would say, Maren's brilliant, but she's not great at the social side. I translate. He'd say it smiling. He'd say it with a hand on my shoulder, like he was protecting me. What he was doing was branding me as incomplete. And I let it happen because I thought avoiding conflict was maturity. Now my bank account read 0. Now my company's escrow was frozen. Now my biggest customer thought I was sloppy at best and fraudulent at worst. And Grant was still texting me like a concerned partner. I'm heading to the office to handle the hospital. Don't stress. Rest. I didn't answer. Instead, Hannah Lee filed the injunction request that morning. We asked the court for an asset freeze on any accounts associated with Northgate Strategic Holdings, LLC, and a temporary restraining order preventing Grant from accessing company systems. A restraining order isn't just about physical distance. In business cases, it can be about contact, harassment, system access, and document destruction. The judge scheduled an emergency hearing for Friday. That gave us 72 hours. Grant didn't wait. On Wednesday afternoon, our building's security desk called Priya. Your COO is downstairs, they said. He's insisting he needs access to the server room. Priya's voice shook when she called me. What do I do? Stall, I said. Tell security he needs written authorization from me, and keep him in the lobby. Priya hesitated. He's telling them you're on medication and not coherent. I closed my eyes. Of course he is. My sister Hannah called me immediately after. He's moving, she said. He knows the clock is ticking. How? I asked. I can't tell you how I know, she said, but I know. That was my second folder. The first folder had been the metadata and the bank form. The second folder was the person who'd been watching him already. Malcolm, the auditor, found the third folder late that night. He called me at 11:48 p.m. Maren, he said, I found the LLC shell trail. Explain, I said, sitting up slowly. Northgate Strategic Holdings is registered through a formation agent in Delaware, he said. The registered agent is used by hundreds of shell entities, but the mailing address for the bank account is a UPS box in Naperville. And the UPS box was opened with Grant's driver's license, he said. I stared at my kitchen wall. It should have felt like relief, having proof. Instead, it felt like grief turning into shape. Hannah Lee spoke the next morning like a surgeon. "We're going to walk into court with a clean narrative," she said. "No dramatics, just documents." "What about the gala?" I asked. "The gala?" she repeated. "The Civic Innovation Night," I said. "Grant is on the program tonight. He's scheduled to accept an award on behalf of Latticebridge. Councilman Reddick is hosting." Hannah went quiet. I could hear her thinking. "That's your public set piece," she said finally. "If he's planning to launder legitimacy, he'll do it there." "Can we stop him?" I asked. "We can do better," she said. "We can let him walk onto a stage he thinks he owns." The plan was simple, which is always how the most devastating plans look. We didn't crash the gala with speeches. We didn't call him out with a microphone. We brought paper. Hannah had the court clerk on standby for immediate filing after the hearing the next day. But tonight, we needed one thing: to keep Grant from destroying evidence. So we did a quiet legal move. We sent a preservation notice. A preservation notice is a formal letter that tells someone they are legally required to preserve all relevant records because litigation is pending. Deleting anything after receiving it can be treated as spoliation, which judges hate. We served it at 6:05 p.m. in the Field Museum lobby, while donors sipped wine. A process server in a plain suit approached Grant like a stranger. "Grant Voss?" he asked. Grant smiled, thinking it was a fan. "Yes?" "You've been served," the man said, handing him the packet. Grant's smile didn't drop. Not immediately, but his eyes changed. Councilman Reddick stepped closer, confused. "Everything okay?" Grant laughed lightly. "Just business," he said, too loud. I watched from across the room, half hidden behind a display case, my arm in a sling, my blazer simple. People didn't recognize me, or they did and assumed I was there as decoration. Grant's gaze swept the room and found me. For a moment, his face did something human: shock, then anger, then control. He walked toward me with that same practiced calm. "Maren," he said softly, like I was fragile, "you shouldn't be here." "I'm coherent," I said. "Don't do that." His smile tightened. "I'm trying to protect you from stress." "You're trying to protect yourself from witnesses," I said. He leaned in, voice low. "Whatever you think you saw, you're wrong. You're on meds. Hannah's manipulating you." "My attorney is Hannah Lee," I said. "My sister is Hannah Caldwell. You should stop guessing which one scares you more." That was the first crack. His eyes flicked, just once. "Your sister?" he repeated. I watched the calculation. Grant liked controllable opponents. A federal investigator wasn't controllable. I stepped back. "Enjoy your award," I said. "Don't delete anything." Then the location twist hit like a blessing disguised as inconvenience. At 7:22 p.m., the museum's lights flickered. At 7:23 p.m., the audio cut. At 7:24 p.m., the room fell into that collective uncertainty where everyone checks if someone else understands what's happening. A staff member climbed onto the stage and announced, "We're experiencing a temporary outage. Backup power will restore shortly." People groaned. Phones came out. Conversations turned into murmurs. And in the dimness, Grant made his move. He slipped toward the side hallway, the one that led to staff offices. Priya, who had insisted on coming despite my protests, whispered, "He's going to the admin suite." "Let him," Hannah Lee murmured beside me. "You want him to destroy evidence?" I hissed. "I want him to try," she said, "because security cameras still run on backup power." I turned my head slowly. There, above the hallway, the small red dot of a camera stayed lit. Grant disappeared into the corridor. 10 minutes later, he reappeared, breathing slightly harder, his tie loosened. His smile was back, but it looked glued. The lights snapped on. The DJ resumed. The host laughed about technology, am I right? Grant returned to the stage when his name was called. Councilman Reddick handed him a plaque. Grant lifted it like a trophy and said, "Chicago is building the future, and we're proud to be part of it." Polite applause. And then Hannah Lee stood up. Not with drama, with a simple raise of her hand. "Councilman," she said clearly, Before you continue, I need to put something on the record. The room stilled, the way rooms do when someone uses lawyer tone. Reddick blinked. Ma'am, this is a gala. It's also a public event with press, Hannah said, and your office is listed as an honorary sponsor. So yes, this is a record. Grant's eyes went sharp. Hannah, he warned quietly. Hannah didn't look at him, she looked at the councilman. My client, Maren Caldwell, is the CEO of Latticebridge, she said. Her COO, Grant Voss, is currently under an active litigation hold for attempted fraud involving an escrow account tied to a hospital contract. A ripple moved through the crowd. Donors leaned forward like curiosity was a sport. Grant laughed once, high and fake. This is inappropriate, Hannah continued, calm. We have a preservation notice served at 6:05 p.m. We have email metadata showing unauthorized wire changes originating from Mr. Voss's device. We have a notarized signature authority form created on Mr. Voss's iPad during my client's surgery. And we have video from this venue's security cameras showing Mr. Voss accessing staff offices during the outage, minutes after being served. Grant's smile froze. Reddick's mouth opened and closed like a glitch. Is this true? Grant turned to the room, hands out. This is a misunderstanding. Maren is injured, stressed, being misled. I stepped forward, my sling visible, my voice steady. Councilman, I said, if you want to sponsor civic innovation, you should probably stop letting people use your stage as a laundering tool. Reddick's cheeks flushed. Excuse me? I held up my phone with one hand and tapped play. It wasn't a video, it was a voicemail. The evidence twist wasn't just metadata in documents, it was metadata in sound. When the outage happened, someone else had been recording. My sister, Hannah Caldwell, had sent me a file earlier that day. She'd said only, use it if you need to. I hadn't asked how she got it. I didn't want to know. I hit play anyway. Grant's voice filled the air, recorded earlier, calm and confident. Reddick, it's handled, the voicemail said. Once the funds hit Northgate, I'll route your cut through the pack the way we discussed. And don't worry, Maren won't even notice. She's out for surgery, she trusts me. A sound moved through the room that wasn't applause. It was people inhaling at once. Reddick went pale. Grant stepped toward me, voice low and dangerous in its politeness. Turn that off. I did not. The voicemail continued, and the timestamps appeared on the screen, proof of when it was recorded, the call log embedded, the origin number. Metadata doesn't care about charm. Reddick backed away from Grant like the plaque was suddenly radioactive. A woman near the front whispered, "Did he just say, you're cut?" Grant looked at the crowd, then at me, then at Hannah Lee, and something inside him finally cracked into panic. This is doctored, he said quickly. This is insane. Hannah Lee's voice stayed level. Then you'll welcome the forensic audit. Grant's gaze darted toward the exit. Priya stepped in front of him without thinking, small but stubborn. Don't, she said. Grant hesitated, and security did what security does when money people start looking nervous. They moved closer. Reddick cleared his throat, trying to recover. I think we should take a break. No, Hannah Lee said. You should call your attorney. The room buzzed like a hive that had been tapped. Grant didn't run. He couldn't, not with eyes on him. But he did something worse. He tried to make me the villain. He turned to the crowd and said, You don't understand. Maren was going to tank this company. I saved it. I did what I had to do. I looked at him and I felt something settle in me. Not anger, clarity. You didn't save anything, I said. You stole, and you used my name like a mask. He scoffed. You think you're so righteous? You built your whole brand on being the serious one, the disciplined one, but you never had the stomach to play real business. Real business is contracts honored and systems that hold, I said. What you're doing is just theft with better vocabulary. Hannah Lee touched my elbow gently. We're done here, she murmured. Not yet, I said. I turned to the crowd, not begging, not performing. I'm not going to argue in a museum, I said. Tomorrow, a judge will see the documents, a forensic auditor will trace the wires, and the hospital will get their answer. If anyone here is a donor or a board member, I suggest you remember what you heard tonight before you attach your name to his again. Sloan Mercer, the board member, stepped forward. Her eyes were sharp. I am a board member, she said, and my husband is on the hospital's compliance committee. Grant's face drained. Sloane's voice went cold. Grant Voss, you should leave, and you should expect calls. That was the social twist I hadn't planned for. It wasn't luck. It was consequences moving through networks. Grant looked at me one last time, and for the first time, his mask was gone. You're going to regret this, he said. No, I replied. You are. The next morning, the hearing happened in a quiet courtroom that smelled faintly of paper and old coffee. Grant arrived with an attorney I'd never seen before, a man in an expensive suit who looked like he billed by the syllable. Hannah Lee stood beside me with a clean binder. Malcolm Reyes, the forensic auditor, sat behind us with a laptop and a face that never changed. The judge, a woman with tired eyes and a voice that didn't tolerate nonsense, listened. Hannah laid it out without emotion. The unauthorized wire instructions, she said. The metadata. The LLC shell registration tied to Mr. Voss's ID. The notarized signature authority form created on Mr. Voss's device while my client was under anesthesia. The preservation notice. The security footage accessed during the outage. The voicemail indicating intent. Grant's attorney tried to object. The voicemail includes embedded timestamp and origin data, Malcolm said calmly when asked, explaining like he was teaching. It matches carrier records. The file has not been altered. The metadata is consistent. Grant's attorney tried a different angle. My client was acting in the company's best interests. The judge leaned forward. By routing escrow funds into a shell LLC? Silence. Then the judge said the words that make people stop breathing. The courtroom went silent. She granted the temporary restraining order. She ordered an immediate asset freeze on any accounts associated with Northgate Strategic Holdings, LLC, pending full investigation. She authorized subpoenas for the notary service records, bank authentication logs, and building access logs. And she scheduled a full evidentiary hearing for the following month. Outside the courtroom, Grant finally looked small. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. He just stared at me like he couldn't accept that systems had worked. Was it worth it? He asked quietly, like we were still partners. I adjusted my sling with my left hand. It wasn't a choice, I said. You made it one. He flinched, like the truth was a physical thing. The hospital's counsel called that afternoon. We've reviewed the injunction order, the attorney said. We appreciate the swift response. We're reinstating your implementation timeline and pausing the Canary Clause consequences pending the forensic audit. So we're not losing the contract, I said, exhaling. Correct, she said. And Ms. Mercer from the museum board called us personally. I glanced at Hannah Lee. She gave me a small nod, like, told you, networks matter. Thank you, I said to the hospital counsel. After I hung up, my sister called. You okay? Hannah Caldwell asked. I'm alive, I said. A pause. That's not what I meant. I looked out my apartment window at the street, at strangers walking with their ordinary lives. I'm not sure, I said honestly, but I'm steadier. That's something, she said. And Maren? Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't protect you when we were kids, she said quietly. I thought being perfect would keep me safe. It didn't. It just made me useful. My throat tightened. We can talk about that later, I said, when my shoulder works again. She gave a small laugh. Deal. The SEC didn't show up with sirens. The U.S. Attorney's Office didn't announce anything dramatic. That's not how most real consequences arrive. They arrived in envelopes, subpoenas, filings, and quiet phone calls. Over the next month, Malcolm completed the forensic audit. He traced the wire path through 3 accounts, 2 intermediary transfers, and 1 attempt to convert funds into a consulting fee to make it look legitimate. The bank produced authentication logs showing the wire instruction change was approved from Grant's device. The mobile notary service produced their session record. The notary had never met me. They'd been shown a photo of my driver's license on an iPad screen. Grant had used an old scan from our onboarding files. The judge did not like that. By the time the full hearing came, Grant's attorney arrived with a new tone. Negotiation. Grant agreed to resign, surrender his equity under a fraud carve-out clause in our operating agreement, and accept a permanent injunction barring him from contacting Lattice Bridge employees or accessing systems. That fraud carve-out clause was something Hannah Lee had insisted on years earlier. It stated that if a partner committed fraud against the company, they forfeited certain rights and protections, including equity payouts. Grant had laughed at it when we signed. He wasn't laughing now. He tried one last message after the order was final. "You'll miss me when the company grows. You'll realize I was the only one who could play the game." I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Hannah Lee. She added it to the file. 1 year later, my shoulder had healed enough that I could lift groceries without thinking. Lattice Bridge had grown in a way that felt quiet and earned. We didn't chase galas anymore. We chased clean implementations, defensible logs, and contracts that didn't rely on charm. Priya was promoted to operations director. Malcolm stayed on as a consultant because I trust people who love truth more than attention. Hannah Lee became our general counsel, and she smiled more often now, like she'd finally found a place where her seriousness wasn't a problem. My sister and I met for coffee once a month. We didn't rewrite the past. We built a new pattern. Grant didn't go to prison in some dramatic montage. He faced something more realistic: professional collapse. The asset freeze forced him to unwind a web of shell LLCs that had been holding other people's money. His name became the kind compliance officers circulate quietly. He lost future roles not through gossip, but through background checks and legal records. He moved out of his high-rise apartment when the lease came due and no one would co-sign. I heard he tried to start a new company under a different name. It didn't get funding. Investors don't like founders with court orders attached. As for Councilman Reddick, he didn't hold a press conference. He resigned after an internal ethics review and an investigation into his PAC. Chicago politics kept moving. It always does. But his face stopped appearing on banners about innovation. Sometimes I still think about the museum gala, the flicker of lights, the way people's respect changes when they smell risk. But I also think about the judge's voice, steady and bored, ordering consequences like it was just another morning. That's what justice looks like most of the time. Not loud, not cruel, just inevitable. So here's what I learned, and I'll say it the way I wish someone had said it to me earlier. Boundaries are not hostility. Evidence is not paranoia. And self-worth is not something you earn by being useful to the wrong people. If you've ever had someone smile while they moved your life out from under you, tell me this. What was the first sign you ignored, and what would you do differently now? Subscribe if you want the next chapter, because the truth is, the moment you win one fight like this, you start seeing how many others are still waiting for you to notice the paperwork.